Hello, everybody, and welcome to Chapter Select, a seasonal podcast where we bounce back and forth between a series of games, exploring their evolution, design, and legacy. I am one of your hosts, Max Roberts, and I am joined, as always, by Logan Moore. Hi, Logan.
Hi. We're back to doing the banjo things again.
One may say that this, is a sequel episode. We could call it Chapter Selecty.
We're trying to use too many of these ooey puns, or not puns, but
references.
Calling the season 3E. We're trying to call this a...
Well, 3E is the most logical name for it. It works out perfectly.
But 3E, they actually say in this game, which I never knew.
Yes.
They say that in Banjo-Tooie, and then I got to the spoiler alert for like one of the final lines in the game, but they say 3E. I'm like, oh, that's where everybody got that from. Okay.
3E is canonical.
Yes.
So we're here. This episode is all about Banjo-Tooie. The previous two episodes, Kazooie, Nuts and Bolts, and this time we're talking about Tooie, which was developed, like the rest of the Banjo-Kazooie games, by Rare for the Nintendo 64, and then later ported to the Xbox 360 as well. I didn't know this, but that port did not launch at the same time as Kazooie. It came out months later. It originally launched on November 20th, 2000, and then later for the Xbox 360 on April 29th, 2009. So this is after Nuts and Bolts and the Kazooie port. I thought that was kind of interesting.
I think I remember that because not to get too much into the history part of it, but I think I bought the Kazooie port on 360 as soon as it came out, but I totally forgot until Rare replayed it. Tooie came over as well. So, yeah.
It's very interesting that they wouldn't have launched together. Maybe there's some history on that I haven't read about. It was directed by Greg Mayles, who was one of the two directors on Kazooie. I'm blanking on his name now. I really shouldn't be. George Andreas, he went on to direct Donkey Kong 64. So they kind of split. It'd almost be like, for me, at least the Naughty Dog parlance, it would be like if Bruce Straley went off to direct something and Neil Druckmann went off to direct something. It was kind of the idea in that pairing. I couldn't find anyone listed as a producer for this game in my research. And I think part of that is because all of the credits for these old, rare Banjo-Kazooie games are funny, and they all have nicknames, so it's not real specific roles. So I didn't see anyone specifically labeled as a producer in my research. But then the music, again, was done by Grant Kirkhope, leading that trail there. It got a 90 out of 100 on Metacritic, so a little bit lower than the original game. And then the 360 port is a 73 out of 100. So that is kind of the summation, a little bit of history and context for Banjo-Tooie. But I wanted to dive right in with our show and our guest, Brian Henken. Welcome to the show.
Hello. How's everybody doing tonight?
Oh, talking to you, talking to Logan, talking about Banjo-Tooie.
Sounds awful.
Whoa.
This man hates Banjo-Tooie. He came out and said it right away.
I can't stand
it's
that game.
Or he hates us.
One or the other.
There's a long con. He just wanted to get on a public forum to diss us.
Of course.
He's been playing this for years.
I love you guys. And Banjo-Tooie, really. It's all a meme.
We love you. Well,
you guys are going to make me blush.
We can use that right there. You love Banjo-Tooie. What is your guys' histories with this game? I feel like mine is unique, but I'm also biased because it's mine. But like Brian, what is your experience with Banjo-Tooie? Like,
so I'll start by saying that if I were to play this game for the first time as a 26-year-old man, I would probably hate it.
Hi, that's me. I'll get to that in a second.
But no, I played Banjo, the first one, probably not long after it came out. I was about 4. And then I didn't even realize that this game that Tooie had come out. I just happened to see it in GameStop one day, like already on the shelf. But it's really strange. I have this weird memory of playing it in Target at one of the demo kiosks, and for some reason in my brain I remember playing like in Spiral Mountain, and I remember it being raining for some reason. I don't know why that is, because that's clearly not how it is in the game. That's not how it is in any of the beta footage or anything. But so that would be like my first, I guess, like introduction to it.
It is this raining when this game starts, isn't it?
When it starts, yeah. But I specifically remember jumping over the broken bridge while it's raining, which doesn't make sense, right? So I guess that's where it starts, is like a half memory of that game. But actually playing it for the first time, I loved it, because it's weird. I was a little too young. I was about 5 years old when I played the game for the first time, so I didn't really understand the concept of like, you know, maybe I should make a new save and play through this game on my own. I just kind of played through the first file that was already on there, which had the game mostly beaten. So what I was doing is I was exploring like a game that was already beaten and just kind of experiencing the world rather than experiencing the actual game. So it's kind of a weird way to quote unquote play that game, but immediately I noticed that like, wow, Banjo-Tooie is much darker than the first game, and it kind of had me a little uneasy playing it for the first time, but I loved it. I don't know why. I always just have this like weird like love for games that are kind of like dark but not like overly spooky. Just, I don't know. It's weird. I really liked it for that reason. And then eventually I beat it. I think I was a teenager when I beat the game for the first time. But of course, not as much as I like the first one, but I do like the game quite a bit. Well, love, hate, but you know, sure, we'll get to that later.
I'll be the bridge to you, Logan, because like Brian, I didn't own this game as a child, but I did play it as a kid, and that was because the kids across the street got all the cool new toys, and they had Banjo-Tooie. And so I would go over to this kid David's house and play this game upstairs in like their playroom or whatever with them. And that's pretty much how I experienced most of this game. There was just this golden period of time in 2000. I would have been like 6 years old, just going over to the friend's house, playing this game. And like every time you came over, there was a new world to explore, because David was playing the game when I wasn't there. It wasn't like just me.
So this would have been in indie, right?
Yeah. And so I'm playing this game through my neighbor, but also playing it at his house, you know, with him. Like we were passing a controller and taking turns. And so I never never played Banjo-Kazooie until this show. And so my only tie to Banjo was Tooie, and then later buying Grunty's Revenge as a kid for my Game Boy. But like that's how I played this game, was through this. And then now you have to think 20 years later, over 20 years, geez, I have like nostalgia glasses. My rose tinted glasses are on for a game that I didn't even own or even really play fully in depth. And so coming back to it in the year 2022 was a very interesting experience. And then I think Logan, did you even play this as a kid?
So I had a similar experience as you. Like I used to go, you know, typical 90s kid thing and go rent games from Blockbuster all the time. So like I knew this game existed, and I had Banjo-Kazooie, and I loved that game. So I knew there was a sequel. And maybe I rented it from Blockbuster a time or two. But I also remember a neighbor kid having the game as well. And I think that was maybe my first exposure to it, because the thing that really stood out to me wasn't the cartridge green for it, right? I believe.
No.
It wasn't.
Pretty sure it's a normal cart. Green was like an army game.
Maybe.
I was gonna say, you're thinking of Army Men Sarge's Heroes 1 and 2.
Yeah, for some reason
games.
I think this game had a green cartridge in my head. I don't know why. Anyway,
the label is green.
Yeah, that's probably just all I'm thinking of then. For some reason, the green label got extended to the whole cartridge. Anyway, it doesn't matter. I know a neighbor kid had it, and maybe I borrowed it from him, or maybe I just rented it from Blockbuster. All I know is I played a little bit of it when I was younger. I think I got up to Witchy World, and I pretty much stopped after that. And yeah, I never beat it, and I never really had any sort of... But as a kid, I never beat Banjo-Kazooie either. It wasn't until I was a teen, kind of like with what Brian said, I went back and I played the 360 version of Kazooie, and I beat that, and then I tried to do the same thing. I've actually tried to play Tooie a couple different times. I tried to play it once on 360, I want to say, and I bounced off it. I think I tried to play it again when Rare Replay came out, and I stopped again. And then this time now I've beat it. So, yeah, it's just, I don't know. It's actually kind of weird that I've never played this game because I like Banjo-Kazooie so much. Like, whenever I talk about the video game franchises that I feel the most... love for, it's probably up there, but yeah, I never played this until now, and now I have very complicated feelings on this game, if I'm being honest, because like Brian said, playing this for the first time when I'm a 27-year-old man, like Banjo-Kazooie, when we replayed that, actually I'll be honest, like Banjo-Kazooie, I'll just talk about general impressions of Tooie now, if that's fine with you, Max.
That's fine,
because I'm sure because I know that's the direction we're headed in. Banjo-Kazooie, I have like general nostalgia for sure, but when we played that game for this time around again, I thought it held up incredibly well in a general sense. I think that game is still very tight. I think all those levels are very well designed. This game, by comparison, feels just so bloated and like unneeded in a lot of ways, and it is really hard to play by modern standards. It's very clear that they took a lot of bad ideas from DK64, which is a game I don't think is bad, but like the lessons, like the things that they took from Donkey Kong 64 and were like, hey, what kind of things should we pull from this Donkey Kong game we made? How about the large levels, and let's put that in Banjo-Tooie. It was very much just like a bigger is better type of era, and I don't think that's great going back to it. I have other complaints too, and we'll get into it. But I mean, yeah, general impressions is just, yeah, this game is too large, and that leads to other issues, which I will get
That's
into.
Such an easy way to like think about making a sequel though back then, because it's like, how do you expand on like an idea that works so well? Literally expand it, like make it bigger, make this like take longer so you get more game for your game, but like,
especially because 3D level design was like still in its infancy kind of, so people of course were wanting to be like, oh well, yeah, let's go bigger will for sure be better. I mean, because eventually we got to stuff like GTA 3 coming out a couple of years later, which was really revolutionary. But yeah,
and I think that actually has kind of been a prominent game design focus, honestly, up through today. Like, look at Horizon Forbidden West. Like, that game is absurdly massive, and I think very padded with its side quests and other things to do. Like, that mentality is maintained, and that translates directly to certain people thinking, you know, well, a game's not worth it if I don't get 100 hours out of it. Like, price and time spent is a ratio that matters to a lot of people. And I think that mentality was definitely the case in 2000. Now,
I think this game is like straight up twice as long as Kazooie 2. Like, it was for me at least.
Personally, my clock time was like 12 hours for Kazooie and about 18 hours. So it was about a 6-hour difference.
Okay. I got through Kazooie in probably 7 or 8.
You also had played Kazooie. You knew Kazooie, though. And I was playing blind. So that's definitely a factor there.
Mine's probably even bigger. Like, I do 100% speed runs of Kazooie, and I can beat that game in close to, I think maybe even under 5 hours. But I am not nearly as familiar with this one, so it was about like 16, 17 hours for me. It's long.
Yeah.
And like, I totally get the whole like, let's make Donkey Kong 64 what Donkey Kong 64 is, and then basically make Donkey Kong 64 2 but for all the wrong reasons. Like, I love Donkey Kong 64. It's like my favorite game of all time. I will be the first person to tell you that game straight up is not good. But I can't help but love it. But Banjo-Tooie is just like, I don't understand it.
I think I don't know how deep we want. Screw it. We may as well get deep into this conversation now. I think the weirdest thing I can say about this game, and I don't know if I said this to you, Max, because I was trying to keep this from you before we talk.
Secrets. You're keeping secrets from me?
Not a secret, but I don't think I said... We try not to talk too much about the games we're playing before we record this show, obviously. One of my biggest takeaways from this game is, wow, Super Mario Odyssey is a very good game, because that game has very large levels, but they fill it with so much stuff that you feel like that sense of accomplishment constantly. The biggest problem with this for me, with Tooie for me, is that the levels are like 3 to 4, 5 times bigger than a lot of the levels in Kazooie, but the jiggies it's always 10 like it was in the last game, and so those 10 jiggies are diluted way more throughout the level, and it's way harder to know where to go. It's way harder to know what like the points of interest are on the map. Like if you get into a level like Freezeezy Peak, for example, it's like, okay, something involving this Christmas tree is going to give me a jiggy. Something involving this snowman's going to give me a jiggy. There's these bears over here that's going to give me a jiggy. There's this walrus back there. Like, you immediately know in a lot of the Kazooie levels, like, the points of interest. That was like, this was one of the hardest things about Tooie for me, is that I did not know what things I was supposed to interact with to get the jiggies in a lot of these levels. Like, I consulted a guide a lot on this game. Or I should say, at least in like the back half of the game, I did for sure.
So I think it's interesting. I want to jump into the gameplay side of it, but I want to keep thinking about just the time in which this game came out. 2000, N64, Rare is on fire. They are putting out a ton of games. Logan, you and I were talking about this, not terribly long ago. I mean, GoldenEye was 97, Diddy Kong Racing was 97, Banjo-Kazooie is 98, Jet Force Gemini, Donkey Kong 64, Perfect Dark, Banjo-Tooie, like all of Conker's Bad Fur Day, and that's not counting all of the other licensed games or portable games that they were also making at the time. They were just cranking games out. But also, around this time, you've got Ocarina of Time came out before. Was Ocarina in 98? It was 98, right?
Yeah.
And then Majora's Mask was on the horizon there in 2000. So you have to think that developers were also pulling in from, at least in that era of making these kind of big world games, pulling in. Like, how do you not look at Hyrule Field and go, how do we bring that over into like what we're doing? And I think I see a lot of that kind of inspiration in Banjo-Tooie. There's a scale and a sense of place. This really is an open world game. Like, at least when I look at it, I go, this is a large space to explore and interact with. Now, the depth of that isn't what you would find maybe today.
Yeah.
Not even maybe, it's not.
That's why I invoke Odyssey, is because Odyssey has those sprawling worlds and levels and stuff, but it's just, there's so much more in them. Like, there are literally 800 or 900 collectibles in that game to get in Super Mario Odyssey. Compared to this, it's just the static, like 90, I think, 90 to 100.
Odyssey really is like the here's how you take Donkey Kong 64 and Banjo-Tooie and do it correctly sort of game. It definitely feels a lot like that now that I'm thinking about it.
Yeah.
Well, I think the key part of that, because I also wrote about Super Mario Odyssey in my notes, which I find kind of interesting that we approach that the same way, Logan.
Yeah, I mean, I kept thinking of that game like the whole time I was playing this. I was just like, dude, like, it took 15 to 20 years, but they got a good version of this style of game they're trying to make here. It's further down the road.
And I think the key difference, and this can launch us right into our gameplay, is in Super Mario Odyssey, Mario has all of his moves up front. Now, granted, the hat lets you play as other things, and those reveal a new type of move. But Mario's core, everything you need to collect a moon in that game, you have from the very start of the game. And in Banjo-Tooie, you do not. You are learning at least 2 moves in every world.
This is another one of my big issues that you're naturally bringing up with the game, for sure.
On top of every move that you have from the first game, too.
Yeah, I thought this would be a great way to come into gameplay. And so I kind of want to kick this off because as a kid, and as someone over the past 20 years, this is one of my defending points for Tooie of like why I thought this was a better game. Was because you could do so much more mechanically with Banjo and Kazooie. I loved, as a kid, splitting them up on the split up pads. I thought all of the different ammo types for Kazooie were really fun and inventive. I thought the different shoes, the way you could climb up the walls, all of this appealed to my 6-year-old brain. I was like, this is awesome. This is so exciting and new. And as an adult, all that is padding. We will make this the longest game possible. Because not only do you have to find a split-up pad, but you also have to take Banjo over here and Kazooie over there, and then you've got to bring Mumbo over here, and it was just this. It's this web of just tiny little tasks and backtracking that today does not hold up. But as a kid, it was so cool and exciting.
Well, I think if you could go a little bit deeper with that and say that like. I don't even know if it's just today, but it could also be like, sit a 6-year-old down in front of Banjo-Tooie right now, and what are they going to think? Was it because when you're a 6-year-old, you have unlimited time, and so when the game stretches itself out, maybe that is fun because, wow, I get to play the game even longer. But as an adult with limited time, you're like, I have to sit here longer with this, and it's midnight and I have to go to bed soon.
As an adult who's trying to beat a game to record a podcast to talk about the game.
Yeah, because I felt that. So is it because you're a kid, like you have more time and you want to play that game longer? Or is it like, no, that really just is annoying? Because it could just be annoying.
It probably is. I think game literacy was probably also a part of it. I mean, at 6 years old, my experience with games at that point was whatever I had on the N64 and a Game Boy. I think so that's a part of it. Your angle on time is another thing. And then this game was designed for kids, like the target audience of the N64. And I just think a lot of those decisions reflect that. Like the powers and things were very, I think, kid-focused. What's not to love about grenade eggs or remote control bombs or fire and ice dragons and just it's designed for kids. That's kind of what I thought.
Off that point, though, there's so much here that it's hard to know what you're supposed to do sometimes. Again, like not only do I not know the points on the map that that it specifically wants me to interact with, but even once I do find something that I'm like, I'm pretty sure I'm supposed to do something here, I didn't always know the answers. The thing that bothered me the most, and this is the great sin that you brought up with our Kazooie episode, Max, is that I believe it's when you get to Freeze-Easy Peak.
Gobi Desert, Freeze-Easy Peak.
Yeah, when you get to Freeze-Easy Peak and you unlock that level in Kazooie, it is the only level in the game where there is a Jiggy in that level that you can't access because you have to get an ability from another world that you haven't been to yet, which requires you to then backtrack later. That happens constantly in Tooie. There were so many times in this game that I ran into things. Like the one off the top of my head is I ran into the turtle in Jolly Roger's Lagoon. He's like, I need my egg hatched. Can you get me to hatch this egg? And I was like, okay, sure. And like I tried everything I could think of to get this egg hatched. I'm like, I don't know. And then like 2 levels.
Did you shoot a grenade at it?
I tried everything. Yeah.
His reaction when you shoot a grenade at it is hilarious.
Yeah. I tried to do like everything, and it wasn't until I think a level or 2 later when it's like, oh, you learned the hatch ability. You can now hatch eggs. And I'm like, okay, great. So I wasted 5 or 10 minutes of a level 2 levels ago trying to hatch this stupid egg, and the ability to get that was levels away. Like that happens a lot in this game. I don't know what the exact count is for the number of times that it happens, but it happens quite frequently.
And that's such a situational move too that is rarely used. So it's almost like insulting that of course, like hatching an egg by literally hatching it.
Yeah, there's a couple, like there are certain moves in the game that I think you only use a handful of times. Like all the different grenade types, obviously.
There's the Kazooie torpedo underwater. There's the different shoes.
I remember the first time I even noticed that thing happening at all was, I think, the very first level. There's a boulder to get into a little underground temple, and I instantly knew, like, oh yeah, because I played this game before. I need to go get the drill move. Yeah. That's not until the next level, which means I have to come all the way back here. Oh my god, I forgot what game I was playing, because it really is just like roadblock after roadblock after roadblock, and it's just disappointment after
and it's exasperated because of how big it is too. It's like they are not helping each other. Not only do you have to backtrack constantly, but you're backtracking through this huge world that they have built. So it's like that much more annoying. And I know they've put the teleportation pads around the levels to kind of make it a little bit more easier in some senses. But yeah, that was really, and some of the steps you have to take to some of these, like I think the most baffling one in the whole game is the one where the bears, again on Jolly Roger's Lagoon, are like, our pool's been poisoned or whatever. And it's like, okay, cool. And then you figure out how to turn off the sludge or whatever. And they're like, now it's cold, or now it's too hot. And it's like, well, what the heck am I supposed to do about that? And then it takes to like 3 or 4 levels later when you find an ice cube in the sky, and then you have to knock the ice cube out of the sky, land it in a pool of water on another level, and then you have to go to that level, and then you have to let the water it's just like, what is this? Like, why am I having to go to 3 or 4 different worlds here to just get one Jiggy? And that's the thing, one Jiggy. Like, you're not the game even pokes fun at this at one point too.
That was just what I was going to. I have
the one with the dinosaur. The one with the dinosaurs.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because you do all those steps and then you get to the dinosaurs. And the dinosaur mom gives you the Jiggy, and Kazooie's like, "Wow, just one Jiggy. I feel like we did a lot more to deserve. I feel like we did a lot more here to deserve a little bit more." And she's like, "Nope, just one."
She just says no, just stone cold, which is actually really funny. We may have used the same guide at I don't know if I was using GameFAQs in particular, because I like to be
I use YouTube, so.
I like to be period accurate, so I was reading an actual like FAQ to the whole thing. But one of the particular guide I found for this game was actually really, really good. I'll link it in the show notes, but I pasted a quote from it. This is in regards to the aliens in Hailfire Peak Mountain, whatever it was called, where you have to use Mumbo to like revive the dad, and then you gotta go get Banjo and Kazooie back onto the ice side. Mumbo's on the fire side, so you gotta bring them back to start getting the aliens. You have to use Banjo to break the ice to free the alien. One of the alien kids is dead, so you've got to bring Mumbo back. So that's the context of this one, and so.
You also have to get them to leave their UFO at the bottom of the ocean first to even start this whole chain of events.
This is also true at Jolly Roger, yes, to even get this to happen. But the writer wrote, the first kid is found right below Mumbo Pad near Wumba's wigwam, Bill Drip, whatever, blah, blah, blah. But what's this? Another dead alien? Geez, they really need to learn how to adapt to the climate. Bring Mumbo back again. And then in parentheses, all this going back and forth. And then quote in parentheses, to raise him from the dead. Like, even the writer of a guide in their free time was like, this is too much, just back and forth, back and forth, back and forth.
Yeah.
And I think that has like a really like bad unintended effect of like when you've played the game before multiple times, like I have, like on this playthrough, I'm sitting here thinking like, obviously we're not doing a 100% playthrough, or at least I was not.
I wasn't.
So now I'm picking and choosing what Jiggies I should go for based on what's going to annoy me the most.
That's what I did.
Like, yeah, so I'm like, I don't even know if I did the alien one, because I think I may have started it.
There's
and I was
so many
like,
steps.
You know what? It's not worth it.
I
it
realized
really
how long that one was going to be, and I'm like, yeah, think I'm gonna go look to do another one here.
Yeah, like I get it, because if you're gonna have these big worlds, sure, put things in it to make it interesting. But if you're not, and you're really gonna have these objectives like spread out amongst them, and it's gonna be kind of like sprinkled on, there is something to be said of like, wow, I'm running around this all the time, I'm backtracking, and I'm really learning the level. That's kind of a cool thing, but what you're getting out of it doesn't reward you for how much you're backtracking. It's done so well in games like Metroid, or like some of the later Castlevania games, where like exploring the world as much as you're exploring it is rewarding you for doing that. Whereas in this, you're getting one Jiggy for essentially, 20 minutes of work. Whereas in the first game, I can get through an entire world 100% in about the same amount of time.
Yeah.
In certain cases. So I get it. Like, I understand what they're going for, but it just doesn't work the same way.
And I think it's funny that Max brought up that like this is a kid's game. Again, some of these solutions for some of these Jiggies are just it's adventure game logic. I know Max has brought this up before.
It is just totally Logan. We're on the same wavelength tonight.
Yeah,
the adventure game was my analogy.
Yeah, it's total old school adventure game logic where you're just having to do these things that don't really make any sense whatsoever until you look up a guide and you're like, oh, I guess I have to get an ice cube to fall out of the sky to go into this pool of water that can then go into this other pool of water that can cool off.
Really?
Yeah.
That's what you push the ice cube guy off for?
Yeah.
Oh, he cools that. He lands in the fire. Oh, I didn't even think
he
of that.
He lands in the fire, and then you go to
I
that.
I killed his wife.
Yeah, I did too.
Okay.
They're both dead. Sorry.
I think the first time I had that moment, like just a complete facepalm, was like in the I can't remember the last world's name. It's in the clouds.
Cuckoo Cloudland?
Yeah, that one. Where the water, you break the boulder at the bottom and the water comes down and it fills up that pool for the dinosaur to drink out of.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, you've got to be kidding me. Like, that was the answer? Like, I had to go like an entire world over, go completely out of my way. Like, this is coming from the guy who made a game where the answer to a puzzle is to pause your game for 30 seconds. And even I thought that this was stupid. I couldn't, like, I just can't wrap my head around a game that's made for like 6 to 10-year-olds being this obtuse. It's just so weird.
I know we want to rank the levels here in a second. Again, I'm not trying to transition for you, but I did want to ask a couple other specific things associated with gameplay before we really move on, because this game adds a couple other gameplay features that I'm just curious how we all feel in a general sense. And those things would be Mumbo, a lot more mini games to get the Jiggies. I guess the stuff with Wumba and the new transformations. And there was something else, but I can't think of it right now. Oh, I guess the first person stuff is really prominent. That's what else I was thinking of. What is everybody's impressions on all of those things? I think I can start, I guess. Playing as Mumbo is cool in theory, but I don't think it's anything more than just extra backtracking a lot of times, and that's my problem with it. The first person stuff, it just feels like, oh yeah, Doom was popular at the time, let's do something like that. Like, well, I just get total Doom vibes from all of those sequences for sure, and it feels unneeded. The mini games are not great, but not horrible either. And then what else did I say?
Wumba.
Oh yeah, the transformations in this game, I will say, are better.
They're great.
They're a lot better than the last game. That's the one thing I think is better than Kazooie at, honestly. Although you still can't do a lot with them, honestly, but they're better.
The transformations are better. Who you get them from, I think, is the weirdest decision of all, because for me, it should have still been Mumbo. I think the reason that Mumbo is even playable at all is because Banjo-Kazooie was as popular as it was. Putting playable Mumbo on the back of the box is a cool way to get people to want to play. I think that they made him playable just for a bullet point, just to say, kind of you can like that, do this. if you had given Banjo a magic wand or like an extra move, you could have him just do all the same things Mumbo does and then cut out an extra like 10-15 minutes of walking back and forth. I don't really feel like it's needed. I think it really just is extra padding. I just don't understand. There's a lot of weird decisions I just don't get. What were you gonna say, Max?
I'm looking at the back of the box for
Is it
Banjo-Tooie. The second bullet says, "Play as Mumbo. Now you're gonna take control of the boneheaded shaman himself."
Didn't even know that.
Mumbo is on the front of the box. He is next to Banjo and Kazooie. He is also presented the same way on the cartridge. I mean, it's not. And I'm reading. Oh my gosh, the third bullet. Meet Humba Wumba. She'll transform Banjo into a number of objects, such as walking, talking statue, a tidy-whitey shooting washer.
Wait, can we actually talk about that too? You mentioned the box, like Mumbo's in the box.
Mm-hmm.
Can we just talk about for a moment how god-awful the box art is for this game?
It's really just three characters.
Sucks. Yeah, I do not like it. I really just...
First one's so much more iconic.
Yes. It's a small tangent, but I just cannot stand how like games with any sort of recognition will just put their character on the front of the box and call it a day. I love cool, unique box art. Banjo 1 has such awesome box art. Even Nuts and Bolts has some pretty freaking cool box art. Tooie just does not. I don't get it. Like, I get it's the whole thing of like Halo 3's coming out. We're not even going to put the word Halo in the trailer. It's just going to be the number 3. You know what this is. Like, it's sort of that thing, but I wanted some cool art, man. Give me something. Show me what this game's about.
It's interesting too, because if you look at the other N64 games that Rare was putting out at the time, the other boxes are good too. Donkey Kong 64 is exciting. It shows you at least all of the characters doing something dynamic, being in the minecart, and you see King K. Rool, and it's like, you get an expansion pack and a yellow cart. Like, it's an exciting box. A GoldenEye, just straight up iconic, Bond. And...
with his extra long lip.
No,
I can't not see that.
I gotta...
Now that I think about it, Conker's Bad Fur Day isn't great. You know what I'm talking about? The long lip?
That can't be real.
It's not real. It's the space between his thumb and his index finger, I think, but it really looks like a long lip.
Oh my gosh, it did. Oh wow, that's wild. No, I can't.
You'll never not be able to see it now.
Oh, you've ruined this box for me now.
I can't believe they actually put Play as Mumbo on the box, and I didn't know that. But that's what it feels like, right? You feel like there's no real like purpose for it other than that.
I have to admit, I love it. I love Mumbo. And that is pure nostalgia talking. That was a selling point to me. In the way, not that I was like played Kazooie and was waiting for Tooie. I just thought playing as Mumbo was really, really cool. And at the time, I didn't really grasp that all he does is actually the same thing he did in Kazooie, just a playable version. Kazooie, the transformations, all they are new means to get somewhere, a switch, if you will. And all Mumbo does in Tooie is be the switch himself. Go stand on a Mumbo pad and make something happen. And sometimes that's a bit more engaging, like in the Mayahem Temple, you are the statue and you get a couple of jiggy, or open a couple of doors and get a jiggy that way. Or something not as dynamic, like do a rain dance in Cloud Cuckooland that makes like a rainbow bridge. And so it's interesting that Mumbo actually retains the same level of like impact, just slightly more engaging. But then Humba Wumba, they invent a whole new character whose dynamic with Mumbo I think is very funny. The two of them competing like to be the best shaman in town, I think is really fun. But also her transformations are way more interesting. Sure, it's still moving somewhere in probably one or two moves, but the diversity is way better than what it was in Kazooie. A dinosaur, a washing machine, a truck, a little statue
Dynamite
that you play kickball with. It's just...
None of
she's
these
way cooler.
Allow you to go into a toilet, though. That's the big problem.
I'm sorry. Your toilet humor...
I hadn't considered that.
Toilet humor was pushed to the side in this one.
Did you like the first-person stuff at all?
Oh, to me, that was just GoldenEye. That was like, let's take our GoldenEye engine and put it in Banjo.
Sort of, yeah.
I only did 2 of them.
We have to do it for the final fight, for sure.
Oh, that's right. That sucks. That's bad. But we'll talk about the final fight specifically. That's bad. And then
there is something interesting though with that, because I mentioned this before we really started like the podcast. I mentioned that I'm playing on a Nintendo 64. You guys played on the Xbox, which means on those first-person sections, you guys had some form, rudimentary as it is, of dual analog control. I did not. The first-person sections...
Walk me through that.
The first-person sections were absolutely brutal for me. Aiming and moving with the same stick is not fun. And there are buttons, the C buttons, up, down, left, right, where you could very easily just say, hey, this is left, right, up, down. Because even in the Xbox versions, I think you can look up and down, but it's like you can't really do it diagonally. You're either going to look up, you're going to look down, you're going to look left, you're going to look right. Those C buttons on the N64 I believe they only strafe left to right. So I had to do all the aiming and moving with one analog stick, and that Target Sand boss fight in the very first world of the game really made me want to put my head through my TV. That was unbelievably hard, and all for the wrong reasons. It was just my setup. And the whole time I couldn't help thinking that, man, if I had been playing this on an Xbox, this would be a breeze. I would have no issue with it. But I guess that's just something that I didn't notice back in the day on an N64, because it was all I had. I remember like playing GoldenEye all the time. Yeah, and that was fine. And then I played Halo for the first time, my first dual analog shooter, and I remember saying to myself, this is too confusing. Why didn't they just keep it like GoldenEye as a kid? Obviously, that's a stupid thing to say. But man, it just made it so much harder for me. So, to the point where like I knew there was a first-person shooter section coming up in the second world after in Glitter Gulch Mine, and I just avoided it because I didn't want to deal with the controls. That's right.
There's one in that level. I forgot.
Yeah. There's more in this game than you're thinking of, for sure.
Yeah, they're in there.
I want to talk about the story before we get to Grunty. The story in this game is Grunty's back 2 years later. Wahahaha. And we have to stop her. She starts, as Logan put it on our Nuts and Bolts episode, she just starts nuking a bunch of people, the Jinjos and Bottles. And so the goal is we've got to go get Jiggies to stop her. And there's some world building and stuff, but really the front and the back of this game are just loaded with all the story. In the middle, there's nothing. There's absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
Except world building side story stuff. So they spend
less
like 20
than
minutes in it.
Like, at least throughout Kazooie, Grunty is like taunting you throughout the whole game. Like this, she's like out of sight, out of mind. There's nothing going on. You run into what's his name, Klungo, a couple times. That's about it, though. So yeah.
The beginning is just packed with 20 minutes of story, where you see Grunty brought back. She has more sisters, and they're absorbing power to like give Grunty her body back. And then the end of the game is there was a quiz, and now you fight Grunty in a tank, and you'll win, and then the game wraps up. And it's not like, this is...
Why do they introduce her sisters as characters? This is my biggest question. They introduce these new characters. They're like, we're Grunty's sisters. We're the new faces in this game. And then they get crushed with 2-ton weights and just die, I guess. Like, why are they in this game?
Yeah, they are canonically dead.
Huh?
They never come back.
Yeah.
That's it.
To me, this is honestly this feels pretty spot on. They just feel like funny characters that kids would laugh at. There's a skinny one and a fat one. They're goofy. They trip. And they're clearly not... I mean, all 3 of the witches are not very competent, but like clearly they're not, they're dumber than Grunty. And so it's just that dynamic of three silly characters.
It stinks because I don't know how you guys feel about it, but I think like story-wise, the game starts off so strong. I love the setup.
Yes.
Like Grunty is back and she's a straight up zombie and she's like N64 graphics aside, like she is like scary to look at.
She's
like
a
her eyes falling
lady.
out. Yeah, like she's scary. Like I don't know if they continue it throughout the rest of the game, but her little, I don't want to say voice lines, but her voice, like the sounds that play when she talks, in the beginning, they're like echoing in like a really like ghostly way, and they say that she's dead. And like less than 5 minutes later, she kills Bottles. Like he's gone. She blows up Banjo's house and seemingly like wrecks the rest of Spiral Mountain on her way out. Like it's all gloomy. It's like sad. Like this place that was so happy in the first game is just like trashed and dead, and it's like this really, like kind of like dark setup, and then nothing really happens until the very end. Mm-hmm. This is going to be a very weird comparison, but Banjo-Tooie's story to me is a little like Death Stranding, where a lot happens in the beginning. There's like very situational moments that happen in the meat of the game, and then the ending happens. I don't know why that's the first thing that comes to my mind. I'm only just like, this is only just clicking with me now. But it kind of feels
that makes perfect sense.
Weirdly similar. Yeah.
I'll give Kojima this. There's still a lot of cutscenes in the middle that are very long.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, there are.
You're not. That's actually pretty apt. I'm actually upset I didn't think of that, because that feels like a thought I would have had at some point. It's so.
But it makes sense, right?
It starts so flippin' strong. I think that intro is one of the most like kind of iconic from that time on the N64. I love the poker setup and the lightning, the mood. It's just so atmospheric. They really stepped up the like cinematic presentation of their games, when you look back at what was done before. And I remember as a kid, this is completely wrong, obviously, because I just played the game, but I remember her being like taking out more people, like, with her laser thing. Like I just somehow recall way more engagement from Grunty in the middle of the game. Like as you progressed further, she was taking out more people and like the threat was mounting. And in reality, she does the 20-minute or so intro of the game and nothing. And then at the end of the game, she comes back. She doesn't even take anyone else out. Like the threat doesn't mount in any way. It's all more just, can we save the two of these, can we save Bottles and can we save the Jinjo King? And like that, almost saving your sister from being turned into like some spell to make Grunty look young and beautiful was more engaging of a plot than saving Bottles and the Jinjo King, because you just met the Jinjo King and Bottles is Bottles. I don't know.
Yeah. As goofy as that is, it's like she really does go from like, I want to be pretty to I'm going to kill people. Like that's quite a jump.
Yeah.
Also, you guys got the goofy intro, because the way Banjo-Tooie is designed is that if the game starts to drop frames at all, the gameplay will actually slow down to make it so movement is it still appears smooth, and that applies to cutscenes also. So when there was any sort of like frame rate dip in the cutscene slowed down, and when Grant Kirkhope was writing music for this cutscene, he had to time it with the slowdown of the cutscene. So your guys' music was out of sync. Mine was not. I got the full effect.
You're blowing my mind right now.
Yeah, like you'll notice it. Like there'll be like large like brass stings that are happening at just like while they're playing poker. Like it doesn't make any sense. But if you watch that cutscene on an actual Nintendo 64, it links up really well. Like I think the sad like organ music that plays when Bottles walks out of the house and falls over starts like way too early. But for me, like right as he's walking out, that sad organ starts playing.
That's so fascinating.
But for you guys, it's way earlier. It's really weird how they didn't try to like fix that at all.
I mean, yeah, the story is just rough in a lot of ways. I already mentioned the sisters just being kind of thrown in there for no reason. I like Klungo's arc kind of throughout the game. He's about the only character that really gets any sort of.
He actually has an arc.
Yeah, he actually has an arc, Klungo, which is fun. Grunty, yeah, is seriously just, I died, now I'm awake and I'm just gonna nuke people. Other than that, all the other characters that appear are really not that interesting. Again, the Jinjo King, yeah, you meet him and then he's dead and it's like, okay, well, I guess I'm supposed to care. I do like the interactions with the Banjo and Kazooie and trying not to tell Bottles' wife and kids that he's literally dead. That's kind of fun.
That was really funny.
That's kind of fun early on when that happens. But yeah, outside of that, this game, it's weird because this game's opening is like literally maybe 2 or 3 times longer than the first game. Like there's a lot more going on here at the start, and it is.
I know how long the beginning of Kazooie is. It's like a whopping 5 minutes.
Yeah, I think the opening to this game is probably close to 15-20 minutes, somewhere in there, I gotta say. Mm-hmm. So it's funny that they introduce all that up front. It's like, wow, this is going to be a way more of a story-heavy game. And then it's just, no, not really. It just devolves into go get jiggies. And that's about it, which I mean is fine. I'm fine. I don't really want a deep narrative in a Banjo-Kazooie game. I just think it's a very strange thing that they introduce all this story up front and then literally 15 hours of gameplay sandwiched in, and then you kind of have a sort of not great resolution for how it ends. I mean, I like them kicking around her head at the end. That's kind of fun and stuff like that, but
sets up nuts and bolts. I think a part of why this story also falls flat is because the final boss is atrocious.
It's lame.
It's so rough. It's just a tank fight, but with
sometimes you throw some chickens in there.
Sometimes
inside
it's
that
just
tank.
Grunty hides in a tank, which feels on character for her. She's a coward, runs away, hides, those types of things. But the whole fight is the tank. There's no engagement with her beyond that. And you've got to shoot her at the right time or blow up the inside of her tank at the right time. You've got to dodge lasers, so on and so forth. I don't know how they landed on this. Logan, what do you think about the final fight?
Yeah, it just feels again like they were obsessed with this first person idea that they implemented in the game, and they didn't want to go down a similar route of the last game. So they're like, what's something totally different we can do? Oh, hey, we threw in this whole new mechanic set with this shooting. Let's just do that. It just totally feels like that, and then they designed a boss fight around it from there. Yeah, it's not great. It's not good.
I wouldn't say it's like egregiously bad, but it's pretty dang bad. I will say I like it better than some boss fights in the main game just because it provides something of a challenge. Whether or not that challenge feels artificial or not is kind of up for debate. But yeah, it almost felt kind of disappointing when you get to the end and you're not really fighting her, you're fighting the tank. And then she'll come out of nowhere and ask you a question, and I don't want to be quizzed. Yeah. I want to have a boss fight.
I'll say this. The mechanic is annoying, but I do like the idea of it, as that feels like a very Banjo-Kazooie. That feels more Banjo-Kazooie than the actual quiz that they make you do before you fight the tank. I do like her popping up and then answering correctly impacts the speed of her attack or not.
It's very on brand, for sure.
Yes, on brand, as the kids would say.
But the way it's implemented, for me, I just kept thinking, this is breaking up the flow of this fight. They should have just, I don't know. I don't know if they could have removed it entirely, but the way it's done, I was just getting a little annoyed with it.
Mm-hmm.
Ever so slightly.
Yeah, it's not great. It's not the bee's knees. But one thing I do think is the bee's knees, and I'm interested to hear what you guys think, is Grant Kirkhope's music. Look at all those chef's kisses.
So good. I could go on forever about this. Grant Kirkhope is the reason I wanted to write music for video games in the first place. The first music I ever learned to play on the piano as a child, the first song I ever learned to play was Donkey Kong, or DK Isles from Donkey Kong 64. And then a lot of the stuff, it's so good. A lot of the stuff from Banjo, like, I'd be like walking to school, like whistling it to myself or humming it to myself. It's so easily gets stuck in your head. And I love the, I think it's called MIDI channel fading, where you can move to a different section of that world and it'll be playing the same song, but a completely different version of it. It can even change tempos or whatever, instruments. And it just makes... He does such a good job of making the world draw you in that much more, because now you have like these really great melodies to associate like each area with. Like a good example would probably be Glitter Gulch Mine, where in some of those back like areas you'll hear like this very high pitched string section that puts me on edge, because they're dark caves. You don't really know what's going to be in there the first time you're playing it. And I think he definitely kind of felt that and just wanted to scare people a little bit. And it works. It works so well. Some of the other things were like the similar songs being played in minor keys. I mean, that's something he does in a lot of those games. Like, you know, DK Isles playing in a minor key when you go to the big mechanical island, or it's Spiral Mountain. The first level of the game is the Spiral Mountain theme from the first game, played in a minor key. It's awesome. It's so good. I could probably go on about it for way too long, but it's just so good.
You can correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not musically educated in any real capacity, but one of the things that I wrote down was it was more subtle, and I think that might be the minor key thing you're talking about. It's way more subdued, and I think a good way. I think the most obvious place of that is when you boot the game up, when you turn it on, and it goes.
Yeah.
It does the tilt down or pan down, I guess, over Grunty's lair, and it's just the little theme at the beginning instead of the whole.
Yeah. It's banjo tuning his banjo, as if like, you haven't been playing banjo for a long time. His instruments are out of tune. He's gotta get them ready to go after 2 years. I love that. It's so cool.
Yeah, I think it blends in and they feel really good with the world. The other notes I wrote down, horns. There's a lot of horns, and that I like the Hailfire Peak music a lot. I think
the French horns are great.
Yeah, I like that on the fire side and on the frozen side, going back and forth between those and hearing the music. I think the way that the music is woven in, while not as probably iconic or like you can pick it out like in Banjo-Kazooie, I think that the music is tied more into the world itself. Logan, what did you think of the music?
Not as many memorable tracks compared to Kazooie, in my opinion. But again, I mean, everything Brian said about what Kirkhope is actually doing with this soundtrack itself is as impressive as always with him. So yeah, the game has great music. It's just not as iconic, but that's hard to outdo Kazooie, because I think that game has one of the more memorable soundtracks ever. So
yeah, I could see that. I also have a bias, again, that nostalgia coming thing. I just definitely prefer this more. I think it's more my speed, but it's also what I grew up with. So I think, though, that the music is actually a really good jumping off point based off the way you were describing it, Brian, to like get to the ranking of the worlds part of what we've been doing this season. And there are quite a few worlds. I mean, all in all, there's 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 11. I mean, Spiral Mountain is barely in the game, and Isle of Hags is really the long hallway that connects all of these worlds together. Cauldron Keep is really not a level in any real
That's
capacity.
what I was going to say. I wasn't sure what you were going to count as an actual world, so I have 7 listed.
I basically the ones that you go through from Mayahem Temple to Cloud Cuckooland. But the other part we kind of didn't really touch on was that this game actually has bosses besides Grunty. So maybe we can just mention those as we go through these worlds. But I think to start out, Logan typically, because he's guided these discussions previously, because he kind of came up with this idea, but he's always started with the negative. He's always like, this is the bottom of the list. Here's your Rusty Bucket Bay, your Terrarium of Terror. We're starting at the top.
Ugh.
I was going to say, let me give you the bottom 4 right now.
To the Terrarium of Terror.
No.
Let me give you the bottom 4 right now. I don't.
No. Positivity. We're starting with the best level in the game, and I will accept nothing besides Witchy World.
It's Witchy World or Mayahem Temple.
Witchy World is the best level in this game.
That's interesting.
Witchy World, yeah, I'm fine with putting that at number 1, personally.
That's my number 1 also.
Okay.
Yes,
I'm so
not
glad
wrong.
you guys put that.
Witchy World is so memorable. It's just got this really fun vibe to it. All these different carnival sections, horror, UFOs, food stands, Western. It's so memorable. I love Witchy World. I get excited playing it. Witchy World.
Well, there's
great.
something about it, and just that, like, every single thing about it works.
Mm-hmm.
In just like
Todd
it's
Howard
interesting
quote.
to
Again.
It just works. Everything about it works so perfectly. Like, you can just looking at the world, just existing in it is fun. It's a carnival. It's meant to be fun.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's super bright colors. The theming of each area is so cool. I just love that idea for for like a 3D platformer world, and the fact that it's also, to me, the one world in the game with the fewest amount of like speed bumps and roadblocks.
It's dense. It's a dense level. Everything is close,
and everything's accessible.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's I could be getting this wrong, but I think most jiggies in that world you can get on the first time around. Maybe there's one, maybe there's even two, but I feel like
the UFO is
I was able to get just about
main
everything.
outside thing I can think of.
You have to do that in Glitter Gulch to bring the UFO there.
But I felt like I was really playing the game there, like, because like nothing was really stopping.
Yeah, it's after Witchy World that I think the game gets really into the bad habits of the backtracking. I think the first three. Yeah. I think the first three worlds are like that, honestly. Which is why I also said I thought Mayahem Temple would also be near the top of my list, because I know that's again just the first level of the game, but I do like that one is pretty self-contained as well. I mean, there are a couple of things you have to do to backtrack to get back there, and get a couple of the jiggies. But yeah, most of those first couple worlds I don't have a problem with because they're light on the backtracking. So those are the ones I'm fond of. And of the early ones, yeah, I think Witchy World is the most unique of the bunch for sure.
So I think this is interesting because I feel like based on what we've just said, number 2 onward might be different for all of us.
I think, yes, I agree. I agree with you, Brian. I do want to say really quick, Witchy World, the boss, Mr. Patch, also my favorite Banjo-Kazooie boss. I know the flying and like shooting stuff is like annoying mechanically. I just love his personality and design.
Same.
Mr. Patch, top tier. When he showed up in Nuts and Bolts, Logan, I got excited. Number 2. And then we can go to Logan's Bad Town. But number 2, I think we're going to differ like Brian said. So I'm curious what you both have.
I think Mayahem Temple maybe. That's probably what I would put number 2.
That's a negative Ghost Rider. Brian, what's your number 2?
None of the others. Anything below Witchy World is automatically worse.
Negative.
This is going to sound so stupid because the reason that I like this world is one of the things that annoys me so much about the game as a whole. And it's Terrydactyland. That's my second.
We're close. We're very close.
I don't know. I feel like it's the one world that takes the whole big world idea and kind of does it. I don't want to say the best because that assumes that it's doing it well, which it really.
It can be the best of the worst, though.
Yes, that's a good way to put it. I love the transformation of that world.
Yes.
I love that it's kind of like 2-tiered. The design, like the visual design of that world is so cool to me. I love that giant mountain. I love the clouds swirling above it. I love the side caves. I love inside the mountain. That's just such a cool little cozy little room. I like the mini game in that world where you're kind of shooting at all the ulcers. That as weird as that is to even say.
I forgot about that.
I just think it's cool. It's just a fun little place to run around in, and it's one of those worlds to me that I think is so cool to just exist in. I think I like that world's personality. I say that a lot, that I think certain games and certain areas of games are fun to just exist in, because when you're a kid, even now, like, obviously it's a video game, but like they're doing everything they can to convince you that this is a real place. And in a weird sort of sense, it kind of is. I feel like that one is just the most fun to mess around in and to just be in. I don't know. It's kind of a weird way to explain that.
Where a kid can be a kid. Terrydactyland would be my third. My second is Hailfire Peaks. And that is because Logan will get this. Hailfire Peaks is my Click Clock Wood. And that is pure nostalgia field. I love the dual boss battle. I think the fire and ice duality of it is great. I like, as an adult now, I like that they bring kickball back. I think that's so cool. You've like Thaw, Explorer Man. I just think the stuff going on there is very
Explorer
interesting.
Man from a past Rare game.
I picked up on that this time as an adult. But I think what's going on there is very interesting and dynamic, and I have fun with it. And it also isn't reusing the same asset 4 times. It's just 2 different mountains, but next to each other. And that's what I like about Hailfire Peak.
I like the idea behind Hailfire with the divided nature of the level. My problem with it is it gets confusing with where everything is at in that game. I struggle to remember where certain points of interest are at because I think it's everything just looks too similar in a lot of ways. I think the fireside in particular is kind of cumbersome, especially to get around.
The fireside really doesn't have anything interesting beyond the Coliseum.
Yeah.
And like the water pool.
Yeah. And then the ice side is it's got a little bit more going on over there. But then
ice side's busy. There's the cave, there's Bogley's house, the train station.
There's more over there.
There are certain areas in that side of the level that I could tell you I remember are there, but I would not be able to tell you how to get to.
Yeah.
That is a very difficult to navigate.
Yeah. That's my main problem with it, is that there's way too many different ins and outs of this level. Like, things connect in really bizarre ways that are almost hard to understand. Like there's a tunnel on the ice side that connects to the fire side, but then if you walk down that path on the tunnel on the fire side of where you just came out of, you can then enter the train station area where you will find the camel up there, and you could jump on his back, but you need the train to be there, so you could. It's just like I don't know. Again, the backtracking stuff, I think it's way worse in a lot of these later levels. So like while I like the ideas and things like that. And this goes for Terrydactyland too. This is my main problem with those 2 levels. Yeah. So I don't know what to put.
Brian and I are close enough.
This is why I said
decree Terrydactyland is number 2.
Well, this is why I said let me throw some quick ones out at the bottom, because Spiral Mountain's got to go near the bottom because there's just nothing to do there. Cauldron Keep same I would say. There's just
I wasn't even ranking those, but sure.
Oh, okay. Well, we don't have to rank them then. Throw those out. Toss them. Jolly Roger's Lagoon's terrible. It's a water level. Horrible.
That is the worst level in the game. That is a
Throw
factual
it out.
statement.
So what are we saying? Is that 8th then? Because we're not ranking Isle of Hags either.
If there's 11 levels, then that's
8.
Yeah. Or 9th.
So Jolly Roger's Lagoon, I think is. I mean, do you disagree, Brian? It's.
Oh no, I just put it at 3.
You put it at 3, really?
Jolly Rogers is your 3rd?
Yeah, I put it at 3.
You're a madman.
I am one of those rare people that is not bothered by water levels in video games. In fact, I actually enjoy a lot of them.
This guy.
I think the thing about that world that is interesting to me is that when I played it for the first time, and I was a stupid kid, and I'm still stupid, I did not know that Atlantis section was there. So when I figured that out and I got down there for the first time, my mind was like completely blown. I thought it was so cool. I don't find the swimming mechanics in this game to be that awful to control.
If you're the submarine, they're not terrible.
Why do they invert when you launch the Kazooie torpedo? I haven't mentioned this. Why does it invert the swimming controls?
Yeah, that is weird.
I don't know if anybody else had this problem the whole game, but the swimming
Did you not
controls
have the invert toggle flipped in settings?
It inverts based on what your swimming controls are, is what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
So it totally inverts itself.
It's also weird how they inverted the swimming controls from Kazooie to Tooie.
Yeah,
I don't know if you noticed that, but they're different.
Yes. Oh.
But they didn't bother me that much. I thought the boss in that world was pretty interesting. It's terrifying. I don't know. I really like how that world's like layout is not all that confusing. To me, it's just if you hate the swimming controls or if you don't like water levels, you probably won't like that level. I also think it's just, for my tastes, just relatively inoffensive. It just was one of the worlds that didn't really bother me that much.
What one did bother you that much then? I'm curious what's near the bottom of your list then.
Oh, there are some ones that bothered me, all right. That really bothered me. But I'm sure we'll get there. So, did we get to your...
No, you can just tell us.
What is it? Just what's the bottom of your list?
What's at the bottom?
We're all over.
So, what's at the bottom is Cloud Cuckooland.
Oh yeah, that one's terrible. Oh, I would say
it makes me want to not play.
I would say I'm sorry. I would not put Jolly Rogers at the bottom. I would put Grunty Industries at the bottom. I hate that level.
I was surprised that wasn't.
Yeah, I don't know how I completely overlooked that one. That's my least favorite by far.
I'm fine with that.
That level, that is exactly what I was saying about things being too interconnected and having a hard time of knowing where the heck you're going. That one is very confusing.
It's probably the worst offender.
Yeah.
It's in the middle for me. It's at number 4.
Oh.
Because in a weird way, I can't defend that world at all. But in a weird way, playing it this time around, every other time I've played it, I've hated it. But I was dreading it the entire game coming up. When I got to that point, I had this attitude of like, this world sucks. It's stupid. It should not be designed the way that it is. But I'm going to like get through it this time. And I'm going to like stomp this level. So I think it was a mix of me having a better attitude going into it and also just kind of remembering things from last time that made it less annoying to try to figure things out because it wasn't my first time, that I was able to focus more on like, you know, the stupid things, like, or not the stupid things, like the lesser noticed things, like the dude in the bathroom having a horrible time. He didn't show up, but I remembered that he was there and that made me laugh. The toilet coming back, I thought that was funny. I also just have like a soft spot for like that kind of like aesthetic, the like overly industrial.
What's your favorite level in Donkey Kong 64? The ship?
Factory?
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. It's just a cool aesthetic. It's part of the reason why I love Mirror's Edge so much.
Oh yeah.
I just think that's a really cool aesthetic. So I think this time I was able to ignore that world's flaws, for better or worse, in favor of just trying to focus on what was not so bad about it. So that made me hate it less. If I were to look at it through the lens of like, how is this actually designed, it wouldn't even be last. I'd probably try to find a way to put it below that. There is a weird... What's so annoying to me about a lot of this game, and that world is the worst offender, is I'm going to go there right now. If you go to a website, it's called noclip.website. I don't know if you've ever heard of it.
Mm-hmm.
For people listening who have not been there, it's basically a website where it has a list of games from different systems that... you can take a camera and fly through levels of a huge list of games in your browser. And I think that's such a cool thing because it kind of like gives you some sort of insight into how a world was made, what's going on behind the scenes. When you go to Grunty Industries on noclip.website, you can see just how simple the layout of this world is. How few rooms there are per floor, how certain areas are supposed to connect to each other. And when you look and see how simple they are from a bird's eye view, it's infuriating that it ends up in the actual game being as obtuse as it is. It's almost insulting.
I almost don't want to look at it because that sounds...
Yeah. Because you can look at, like, even the second floor. There's only, like, 3 or 4 rooms. But to get between those 3 or 4 rooms is such a slog. It's so... It's awful. So it's like you can almost see how they were padding it out to be just about the worst level in any Banjo game.
Yeah.
Or close to it. Yet, despite all that, for some reason,
you're a crazy person.
This time, I didn't like it as much. I was an insane person this time.
Well, Grunty's at the bottom, and I'm sorry, but Jolly Rogers
should be at the bottom.
8th. 2-1. I'm sorry. Very, very sorry.
It's fair. It's fair.
I think Cuckooland is bad. If Brian thinks it's bad,
it is. Yes,
it's pretty.
I'm fine with that being 7. It's so. That's just a hodgepodge level.
That's just so disjointed and just all over the place.
The one thing I'll say about it, the best part of it is the boss fight with the robot Mumbo. I always liked that as a kid. That thing was dope.
How do you, is there like a way to beat the flying person in this level easily?
The flying person?
The
Canary Mary?
Yeah.
Oh, you have to fix... I don't know. I didn't find a way.
Is there like a way to fix the
rat
mouse thing that you're flying on? Yeah.
I didn't even do it.
I tried a couple times and went, nah, never mind.
Yeah, I tried a couple times. I was like, okay, something's clearly wrong here.
One of the jam jar signs says like the lady will fix the rat or something. I don't know.
I saw that one too.
Are
we counting Isle of Hags here? Is that a level that we're counting?
It's just a hallway that connects things. I wasn't really planning on it.
Then I think a more interesting lens to look at that through is comparing it to Grunty's Lair from the first game.
I do think that. I think it's better than that. I think there's more going on, and it's interesting, and it makes the world feel truly connected instead of like a tower with separate portals. This feels like, we're in a space.
Then we're going to do this. Okay, so then what's the middle? So if we've got...
You guys are going to hate my 5 and 6. You're not going to be proud of me for putting these where I put them.
Go for it, then.
5 was Glitter Gulch Mine.
And then 6 was Mayahem?
Yeah, my second worst was Mayahem.
I mean...
Because my problem with it is that a lot of it is either a really like uninteresting or simple solution to a problem, or getting a jiggy is just so simple that it's insulting to me.
But that's what I liked about Kazooie. I guess that's why I like it, because this feels
Kazooie
like the
made
one
it
level
a little more interesting.
Sometimes, yeah.
Sometimes, like even that first level, like Mumbo's Mountain, there are jiggies that you just walk right up to them and you get them, which is fine. But you still do have like the oranges landing on the tiles, climbing to the top of the mountain or to the termite hill, which doesn't really feel like much, but it's kind of like an achievement for like your first thing. It's like, wow, I got to the top of this thing and I figured out that I needed to turn into the termite. Whereas Mayahem Temple, it's just like, well,
walk to the top.
You have to have this. Yeah, it's like you got to go to the top of this thing and get it here, and you just walk up there, or you have to cross this pond of mud by just having the right move to climb along this ledge and hold left until you get there. Or it's, sneaking with the snake, it I guess is kind of cool.
Not on Xbox, it's not.
That's the worst jiggy in the whole game to get. Yeah, because just the way the thumbsticks work compared to the N64 one.
Oh, no.
The gap between, like, think of the range of motion that an N64 stick has, and then compare it to the range of motion of an Xbox controller, and the gap between tiptoeing and just actually walking is so small.
Oh god, yeah, it wasn't bad for me.
I actually used my Elite controller, made a profile, modified the stick to have the lowest response time, and got the tallest stick so that no matter basically if I threw the stick full tilt, Banjo was tiptoeing.
That's
amazing.
I just sucked it up and did it.
No, I was just.
And
I tried
horrible.
a couple times and went, nope. We're getting around this one.
It was very bad.
Yeah, I didn't like it for a different reason, and just that I didn't think it was like there's a gulf in the middle of too easy and too hard that I didn't think that first level was really quite scratching the itch in the way that like first levels of other 3D platformers did.
So, okay. So it sounds like, I would say, is anybody really hot on Glitter Gulch? Because it sounds like we're all kind of like mid-tier on it, which means we could probably put that at like 4.
Glitter Gulch is my 3. I just love the look of it. I love the purple. I love the layout of like Wumba in the middle and the different mine
It's also things. The only world where
like
when you warp to her thing, you go inside.
Mm-hmm.
When you warp around, it's the only world in the game where you warp straight to like just being inside of her tent.
Oh yeah, because it would be right on the hill. And I like King Cole being the boss and that tying directly into the train going between the worlds. I just think it's a very interesting.
I do like. I don't dislike that level at all.
No, I like it. It's my 3. If I had to,
I would be fine putting that one higher than personally. Like, we're ranking these, and I don't really have any strong feelings towards any of them on the list. I can tell you which ones. This is why I wanted to start with the worst ones personally, because I can tell you which ones out of the bunch I think I dislike the most, but I can't tell you which ones I really love the most. Witchy World, I would say, is number 1 because I feel like it's the most unique, and then all the other ones that we had talked about that for the reasons I think they're bad. But now it's just like a hodgepodge of, levels I have pretty huge problems with, and so I don't know how to kind of separate personally.
I mean, for me, it's Witchy World, Hailfire, and Glitter Gulch, or like that structure. And then I throw Mayahem in the middle, and Terrydactyland in the middle, and then the back half we've already established is kind of like the flow, I think, there.
Where'd you say Hailfire was at for you, Brian?
I put it. Oh, I didn't even mention it's number 4. It's right between Jolly Roger's Lagoon and Grunty Industries.
This crazy kid.
I think if you look at our lists, like you guys kind of have a little more similar list than I do, but I think it's different because like Max, you said you had never really fully played through the game. Well, at least not in a long time, right?
Yeah.
And then this was Logan's first time. This is probably like my 13th or 14th playthrough of this game.
It's so fast.
So a lot of my picks were just based on like how much did I enjoy like being in the world and just the vibe of the world as compared to like your guys' like how much did playing the game annoy me here? Like what worlds were the most of just a pain to navigate, which is like a more than fair way to rank the worlds your first time or second or third time around. But me knowing this game as well as I do and having more of a nostalgic attachment to it, I was just like, well, which ones make me feel good just by looking at them? Which is a weird way to look at a game at all.
I think Glitter Gulch should be in top 3 based on what we've all said personally. I don't know
I agree with that. But I'm willing to concede it down to or up to second if you both feel so strongly that something else doesn't surpass that. But I've said my piece.
I'd say that's fair.
Second for Glitter Gulch, then?
I'll concede.
Okay. Mayahem, I feel like, is like 5th, then. I'm not going to die on that hill for it personally.
I think it's there. I think the other ones are better. What's left in the list?
4th and 3rd then would go to Terrydactyl and Hailfire.
Definitely.
So, yeah, that's fine.
So which one which one is 3rd and which one's 4th, I guess?
3rd is Hailfire. I'll fight for those dragons. I'll fight for Chili
I would say I like
Chili
Hailfire more than Terrydactyl personally.
Yeah, I think the concept's a little more interesting too.
So that kind of gives us our list with scratching out Spiral Mountain, Isle of Hags, and Cauldron Keep just because they're just connecting points. In 8th is Grunty Industries. Sorry, Brian, that's where that one belongs.
No, that's a fair judgment for sure.
Jolly Roger's Lagoon in 7th, Cloud Cuckooland in 6th, Mayahem Temple in 5th, Terrydactyland in 4th, Hailfire Peaks in 3rd, Glitter Gulch Mine in 2nd, and Witchy World in 1st, where it belongs. And I think to kind of wrap this episode out, I want to go just briefly talk about what the legacy of this game is, because for me, I think to start it off is the one thing I wrote is kind of the thing I've been saying this whole episode is that this is truly the best game to play as a 6-year-old at your friend's house in short spurts, because I never got to experience the grind of confusion. I was always playing at least with one other person, the person who lived in the house, and you could figure things out together or a team, or maybe, that kid had already known what to do and could guide me towards it. I never had to wander around or pull out the player's guide or search on the internet how to beat this. It was just an exploratory thing in short spurts. And so that gave me a really warm feeling about the game looking back on it over the years, and playing it today, just the padding. It's just, I think the moves you do are interesting, but I just think the stretching of it so thin really brings the experience down over time, where to the point where you just don't want to do certain things because you know it's going to take you longer. And I think that's the kind of the shame of it, which really makes Nuts and Bolts feel more like an honest Banjo sequel, really, which is interesting. Just kind of this strange hindsight of like how Nuts and Bolts actually is more of a Banjo game than I previously would have said, and it's because of a warped perception.
I definitely think I don't even know if I'd call Nuts and Bolts a better sequel, but what I would call it is like a really nice like celebration of Banjo, like looking like Banjo but from a different.
I meant better sequel in the sense of like it actually is a sequel more than being separated like I would have previously thought.
Yeah, it makes it like playing Banjo-Tooie now makes it feel closer to Banjo than it originally did, because it's easy to just be like, yeah, car is bad. But
that's what I would have said
like
before.
It's kind of it's more in the same vein of the games than people are willing to admit. Tooie just makes that a lot more apparent when now like I can still say that I love the game, but oh boy, has it not aged well. Like, not at all. And it's not even just like the graphics haven't aged that well, because they have. And it's not that like, you know, it performs bad, because even on a Nintendo 64, it's not unplayable. It really just is the design of the game overall that hasn't aged well, which is weird, because you look at like Yooka-Laylee, which is largely made by the same people, and they have like, you know, like a whole feature of the game which is expanding the worlds to make them bigger and make them longer. They did it again.
That's a mechanic?
So it's like, is this really just a pitfall that only existed in, you know, 1999 or 2000, or is this something that people still think now? Like, a bigger game is a better game, or a longer game is a better game. Like you said before, like, yeah, I'm spending $60 on this game. If I don't get at least like 20 or 30 hours out of it, I wasted my time.
More importantly, wasted my money.
How long has this been a thing? Because I don't think that. I know you don't think that.
Right.
Celeste is one of the shortest games I've played, and it's one of my favorites. Inside, I can beat that game in like 3 hours, and it's incredible. I'd spend $60 on that. Like, I don't think it's the time or how big a game is. I think it's just how good of an experience it is. But man, did they, like, you can make a game bigger, you can make it, you know, long, but they just didn't go about it in the right way. I can like happily say that, man, I put 65 hours into Elden Ring and I loved every moment of it, but I put 16 or 17 into this game and I liked probably like 7 hours of it. Whereas a 6-year-old, I wouldn't tell you that. I would have told you the opposite.
I think the most interesting note I wrote down while I was playing this game is I just wrote 3 words, and those 3 words were Yooka-Laylee better. I think I didn't think Yooka-Laylee was super bad when I first played it, but I didn't realize how much better that game was by comparison to some of these old games until I fully played through Tooie. And I'm not trying to get into a weird legacy conversation involving Yooka-Laylee and stuff like that.
Yooka-Laylee's not bad.
It's not bad. I think it's better. I just think this game's legacy is that it's the last real Banjo game, and that's been true for 22 years now. So that's kind of a weird thing.
You just wait until we play Grunty's Revenge.
Yeah, maybe. Then again, that's still not a true when people think of Banjo games, they think of this and they think of Kazooie.
Real Banjo fans think of Grunty's Revenge.
Maybe.
Real Banjo fans think of Banjo Pilot.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you.
So I don't know what you guys are talking about.
I mean, yeah, this game's legacy, I guess, is just that this is the last real Banjo game, because no one's really counting Nuts and Bolts or Grunty's Revenge for obvious reasons. For me, I guess this game's legacy is just, Yeah, like all those years of me not playing it, even though I was like, I should play that game. Like, I totally didn't need to play this game because I think it hasn't, like, I'm not one of those people that's like, this game's ruined my childhood now, or so, like, me now having fully played this game has not in any way ruined how much I like Banjo-Kazooie or this series. But it's definitely a rough game. The game I would tell people to rush out and play in 2022, like we have here. Yeah, it's just a product of its time. I think that's probably the best way to describe it, is because a lot of the things they're doing here, I can totally understand why they happened in such a way, but I can't abide by them 20 years later. So, yeah.
I get it. And I think on that note, we'll wrap this episode of Chapter Select up. Thank you all for listening. You can follow the show on Twitter at Chapter Select. You could follow myself on Twitter at MaxRoberts143 and my writing over at maxfrequency.net. Logan, you can follow on Twitter at Moreman12 and his writing over at comicbook.com. And then Brian, you can follow on Twitter at Brian Henken. He's co-founder of Songhouse Games. Anything in particular you'd like to share with the audience, Brian?
Yeah, if you follow at Songhouse Games on Twitter, pretty soon we're gonna have a big announcement for our next game. It's a little stressful because I'm really not all too sure what people are gonna think of it. It's very different from the last game we've made, but it's something that I really believe in. It's something that I'm super passionate about and excited to show off. So you can check us out there. I'm also, I don't even know if you guys really know much about this, but I'm also part of a little sketch comedy group called Digital Wellbeing. I love that project so much. I have a lot of fun with it. It's a fun time if you like really stupid humor. Maybe this is a stupid little plug also, but I just recently finished a portfolio of all the music I've written for video games. You can find that at brianhenken.com. Very proud of that. So if you have a little project that you want me to write music for, brianhenken.com. Go there.
I can attest to it.
Other than that,
he wrote theme music for Behind the Pixel. So
I hope you don't mind that I put that on there.
I don't mind that at all. You wrote that music. That's yours.
There's an entire episode of wow, I didn't even mean to do that. Behind the Pixel on the website.
Station. That just means all the trolling work.
I didn't even mean to do that. That was a genuine mistake.
Brutal.
That's so funny. Was that Michael or Mario that did that?
It was all of them. They all did it. But with that, thank you all so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode and look forward to the season 3 finale with Banjo-Kazooie Grunty's Revenge. Thank you all and adios. Chapter Select is a Max Frequency production. This episode was research produced and edited by me, Max Roberts. Season 3 is hosted by Logan Moore and myself. Season 3 is all about Banjo-Kazooie. For more on the season, go to chapterselect.com/season 3. Follow the show at Chapter Select and check out previous seasons at chapterselect.com.